What is up, News Story students? I miss you guys. It is so lonely in this room without you guys running around. I hope we can begin to meet soon. But for now, we've developed a weekly rhythm for us to stay connected as best we can. And I just want to give you a quick breakdown of what that's going to look like and what you can expect. Mondays, I'll be going live right here on the Gram. That'll look different each week, so just stay tuned for details there. Wednesday, like today, we'll be walking through our series in a shorter form, and each day of the week we'll be posting devotionals so you can stay connected, not just to this group, but more importantly, stay connected to Jesus. Now, on Big Brain Friday, you'll hear me and others on some big brain tricks and tips to help you make it through quarantine. Maybe even some fun cooking tutorials along the way, because you guys know me and I'm an incredible cook, so stay tuned. As for now, I want to take a few minutes and jump back into our series we've been going through called Save the Date. And we've talked about a couple things primarily. We all want a relationship that's successful and loving, and unfortunately we don't see that around us a whole bunch. And if we want a relationship that isn't like a majority of relationships, man, we can't date like a majority of daters. We have to approach it differently, right? We've said when it comes to dating, becoming the right person, the person you're looking for, becoming the right person is more important than just finding the right person. We all want a partner that's kind and generous and loving and self-sacrificing and on and on and on. So instead of trying to find that person, we switch our focus on becoming that person. We also said don't make anyone your everything. You have incredible opportunities right now, so don't isolate yourself from your friends and your family in pursuit of that person. Make the most of right now. And man, if you have someone to walk through that with you, that's awesome. But don't make anyone your everything. Now, where to begin? So, have you ever seen someone completely abandon all common sense when it comes to dating? Maybe that person was you. I mean, if we're honest, but you've probably seen this happen with a friend or someone that you know. Maybe that person's really smart when it comes to nearly just every other area of their life. But when they start dating someone, it's like they become just dumb overnight. Tell me if that sounds familiar. For example, maybe you have a friend who says things like, I've never dated someone like this before. We have something special, right? Maybe you've heard that. And you're thinking, let's be real here. The last 4 girls were exactly like this girl. And none of those situations ended well. Sometimes we're amused, at least I am amused, when our friends abandon common sense in their dating relationships, but sometimes it's just sad to watch. And in some ways, that's why people talk about regret so much when they talk about dating. It isn't that dating itself is bad. The problem is when we're in a relationship, it's harder to see things clearly. And when someone can't see the situation clearly, they make choices they wouldn't have made otherwise. They make choices they regret. And what's interesting is that we see it when it's happening to other people, but we don't always see it in ourselves. See, it's so easy, I think, to see something or someone making a bad choice or being a bad friend, but when it's you and me, it's not that easy. See, we all tend to have some general rules when it comes to dating, like this is obvious, don't date a cheater, right? Don't date someone who brings you down. Don't date someone who treats you poorly. Don't date someone who pulls you away from friends and goals or values that you have for yourself. But when we actually start falling for someone and catching feelings and getting emotions involved, man, those rules tend to become a little bit more flexible. And we say things like, man, I can control this. It won't get out of hand. I can handle the consequences. And these views can bring us to a place where we make less than great decisions. The question is, what do you do about it? How do you save your dating life from decisions that you'll regret? So to talk about that for just a minute, I want to look at a story from the Bible that speaks to this issue that involves, this story involves a man named King David. And David was you've probably heard of him, David was known as victorious general, a great leader, a man after God's own heart. But even with those credentials lined up, he still made some really bad mistakes. And during that time when a nation went to war, the kings themselves fought alongside their troops. But look what David does in 2 Samuel. It's a little different. It says in the spring of the year when kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab, the Israelite army, and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. And that's verse 1 of 2 Samuel 11. David decided not to go, and this decision had consequences that would unfold later. By choosing to stay home, David was essentially sending this message to his troops, not one you want to ever send. I want you to fight for my honor and our people, but I'm not willing to do the same. And see, this was just the beginning. His army was gone, and David was home, and he was bored, and you can relate with that, quarantine, borantine. You're over it. You've watched everything on Netflix, which we previously didn't think was possible, and you've slept more than you ever have in your life. You're bored. And as David learns, bad things tend to happen when we're just bored and idle. So one afternoon, he's on the roof of his palace, and he notices a beautiful woman bathing. Rainwater was gathered on rooftops, so this was normal back then, and the king's palace was higher than other ones. Could see it easily. He decided he wanted to meet her, so the king, with his power, he sent someone to go and get her. She was married, he knew that, but he didn't care. David wasn't interested in logic. His judgment was just clouded by his emotions and what he felt. David probably made a few assumptions, like, I can control this. It won't get out of hand. I can handle the consequences. Sound familiar? So he sleeps with Bathsheba is her name, and soon after that, Bathsheba discovers that she's pregnant. And this was lesson number 1 for David. He was not the exception. He made an irresponsible choice, took advantage of a woman that he had no right to sleep with, and got her pregnant. It was a mess. But that would have been the only mess and he immediately owned up to it, the mistake right away. Then and there, it would have been mitigated a little bit more. But he didn't. Instead, he panicked. He decides to call Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, home from war. He's thinking that if he can get Uriah to come home, sleep with his wife, everyone will say, "Hey, it's Uriah's baby. We're good. This is really turning into reality show territory." But when Uriah gets home, he doesn't feel like it's right for him to sleep in his own bed while his friends and fellow soldiers are out fighting war, so he slept outside the palace instead. This was admirable, but it messed with David's plan. So David makes it worse. He invites Uriah over for dinner, hoping to get him nice and drunk so that he'd go home and sleep with his wife. But no, Uriah still won't go back to his house. Once again, he sleeps outside the palace. So now David is desperate to hide what he's done, and he goes for the ultimate solution. He gives the order for Uriah to go back to war, but this time, David wants Uriah stationed at the front lines where the fighting was most dangerous, because if David couldn't cover up Bathsheba's pregnancy, then Uriah had to be taken out of the picture completely. And that's what happened. Uriah was killed, and afterwards David made Bathsheba one of his wives. Now we listen to the story today and wonder, what was David thinking? These are terrible life decisions. But the truth is, there are times in all of our relationships when people might look at us and wonder the same thing. Even though we're not going to resort to murder, I really hope not. The truth is, all of us are capable of making really dumb choices and getting stuck in the situation we never could have imagined. Sometimes when we're in the middle of a situation, we can lose perspective. We can convince ourselves that we're the exception. I know I do this all the time. We believe that we won't have regrets, that we won't get caught, that we can turn things around, that we can make this right, that we won't turn out like everyone else in 2,000 years of human since this took place. We have a relationship that others can't possibly understand. So when they tell us something is off, it's just that they don't get us. But the reality is, when we believe that we're the exception to the usual consequences, we're in denial. We're fooling ourselves. And if we aren't careful, we can find ourselves in a situation just like David. Not exactly like David, of course, but stuck like David, surrounded by the results of bad decisions that we thought we would avoid. And I think it's easy for us to sit here and read this and see what David did wrong, but the question is why? Why did he continue to make bad decision after bad decision? I think that's what we got to evaluate. I would say the reason is that throughout David's ordeal, he was asking the wrong questions. Because over and over as we read through this, he was asking what he could do or what he could get away with. How could he avoid the consequences? Every decision he made through that perspective. And because he was the only person really speaking into those decisions that he was making, Man, he was able to excuse all kinds of bad ones. After all, when we believe we are the exception to the rule, we can justify just about anything. We can tell ourselves things are okay when they're really not. And that's especially true in our dating lives. The tendency to justify bad situations or allow unwise choices doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you a normal person. I mean, we're all tempted to lean away from the truth when it threatens someone or something we like. But here's the thing, you owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself. As an adult, and some of you are young adults, you owe it to you to make sure your life, including your dating life, is the absolute best it can be. So when it comes to dating, it helps to ask yourself the right questions. Is there any area where you find yourself thinking that you can get away with something or trying to find ways around the rules? Is that you? Is there any area where you find yourself thinking, that may be true for everyone else, but this isn't true for me or for us, for me and my person? Is there anything that makes you think you have things under control even when everyone else is telling you differently? See, in other words, is there an area where you're just not being honest with yourself? David was the king of Israel. He was a smart person, but even with all of his power and all of his intellect, he got himself into a mess that led to consequences that he dealt with for the rest of his life from that one moment. So when did David realize how far he'd gotten off track? Well, a guy named Nathan, who was a prophet, spoke up to him. And prophets were typically people used by God to communicate his insights to people, just to simplify it. So when this situation had officially spiraled out of control, Nathan confronted David, and David eventually listened. He got clarity that he had been unable to see otherwise. See, I'm convinced we all need a person who will be honest with us when we're not being honest with ourselves. So this week, I encourage you to do three things, just three things as you're going through this week. Find your Nathan, number one. This could be a wise friend. It could be your small group leader. It could be a trusted, just adult in your life. Think about the people in your life and identify someone who will shoot straight with you. So find your Nathan. Number two, ask them to help you see areas where you're not being honest with yourself or facing the truth in your life. I know this sounds difficult, maybe even scary. I know it sounds like that to me. And listen, you don't have to tell them everything, every single detail about every relationship. Chances are they'll be able to see things just by knowing you and the information you give them. And number three, listen to that person. Even if you have a trusted person and they have wise things to say, that wisdom is just wasted if you won't listen. So make the decision to always give this person a chance to say what they see, to always be honest with you, even when, and especially when, it's something you may not want to hear. Because if you don't want to hear their thoughts on the situation, there's a good chance you need to hear it. You owe it to yourself to have a clear view of who you are and your choices and your life. And one of the best ways to get a real clear view of your situation is to invite a person on the outside who will help you see your situation honestly. So here's the kind of a big truth. Being honest with yourself now will save you a lot of pain later. And I'm not talking about 10 years from now, although that's possible. I'm saying it can save you a lot of regret. It can save you a lot of baggage just weeks and months from now. The reality is all of us can end up a million places that we didn't want to be by accident, all because we never asked tough questions and made tough decisions. But to end up where we want to be, and more importantly, where God wants you to be in dating relationships and in life, to save the date, if you will, to go with the series, you need to be honest with yourself and let someone else be honest with you. Remember, you owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself. Man, high school is an incredible season of your life that if you allow Him to, God will use to bring glory to Himself first and foremost, but also bring real joy into your life and to the lives of those around you. Guys, you owe it to yourself to be honest with yourself. Love you guys. See you Friday.